So, welcome to another installment of the most incredible podcast in the world ever. No appointment necessary. Today we're with Uwe, and I've just been told how to pronounce that name properly. It's like Hoover, but Uwe. Uwe is, we call you Ove internally, by the way, at
Okay.
HMG. So, just so you know, and I have had questions about is this a female or a male. So there we go. Anyway, Uber is one of our customers, very long-suffering customers, who owns Indergaard Physio, who actually owns more than Indergaard Physio now because he's been running around and spending lots of money. Do you want to give us a quick rundown on who you are and all of the millions of clinics that you bought?
Um, what an introduction. So my name, you got it right, finally. It's only taken a couple of years. So yeah, my name is Ove Indergaard. I'm a chartered physiotherapist of trade, and I run Indergaard Physiotherapy, which is based in Leeds. But over the last couple of years, I've been trying to focus on growing my business a little bit, and then decided to go down the M&A route, buying a clinic or two. And now we are a group of 4 clinics, and 2 of them we've bought and developed, and one of them we've grown from scratch as well. So different challenges in different places, and each clinic has proven to be a new challenge, which is quite interesting.
But let's start with something else, actually, because it's quite interesting. Because we first met, I'd say, about 3 years ago, and it was quite funny because we were on a call about marketing, and it was actually marketing Shockwave because you're a bit of a, can we call you a Shockwave guru? We'll say expert, a bit of a Shockwave expert. And I remember at the time, he didn't like me very much because I rubbished your website, and but it
Pretty
was
much.
interesting because back in those days, you weren't doing an awful lot of marketing, if any at all. I think probably some internal, but you weren't really doing much marketing in the clinic.
Yeah, I mean, our journey's been quite interesting, really, and I've reflected a lot on it because I've had to readjust my kind of mindset around things. You know, when we first met, my website I thought was absolutely smashing. It was doing really well, and we were filling out books, and we were fully booked all of the time. And we were a bit of a smaller team than we are now, and that's for sure. And I think your memory don't serve you very well because it's probably close to 5 or 6 years, if not 7.
That long.
Yeah, it's been a while since that first talk. And when you've started off, and you've always been quite frank speaking, I guess, and you tell me that your website's shit and you need to do something about that. At the time, I was quite rightly a bit defensive. I thought that my website was good and my books were full, so there wasn't really a problem. And, I think what happens then is as you grow and develop, your needs change. And, I think as I've gone from having, 2 or 3 physios working with me in one clinic to 5 or 6 physios working in one clinic to then having multiple clinics, you realize that as you scale, you have to rely on more than just your word of mouth. Your word of mouth can get you so far, but then to have that consistency of acquisition of new clients, you do need a more thorough approach to it. And so I guess that's where we then met a couple of years ago again. And we started off, it was probably about 2.5 years ago now, where we started looking into what that strategy would look like. And, I think having worked with you over the last 2.5 years, the amount that I've learned from it, it's been quite astounding, really, in terms of the marketing that we're doing, the marketing that we need to do, and how they all fit together, which is quite an interesting thing. And even now, we're needing to fine tune and hone and develop it further. And as we're learning more and more about each of our new sites and what they need and what journey which part of their journey they're on in the whole overall scheme of things.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a few things happen. One is, you're right, scale. And the more you scale, your needs do change and so on. But I think also, I think competition is way higher than it ever used to be. I think that people or clinics have become much more digitally savvy over the years. So pre-COVID was a whole different ballgame. You might see 2 clinics in Leeds advertising. Now it's 30 clinics in Leeds advertising. And it's almost as if and we had this conversation literally a few days ago. It's about almost now you have to do the marketing to almost keep up, because if you don't, everybody else is getting ahead. So I think those 2 things happened, which has kind of been really interesting. We've seen it in the industry where I think we found some stats. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like between 23 and 25, you had to increase your marketing spend by 30% just to stand still compared to where you were back in 23. So it's definitely come a long way. One interesting question, actually, just as a side topic, when you're looking at acquiring a clinic, how important is it that it has a marketing capacity already and a way of acquiring patients?
Well, there's many different things you look at when you're buying a clinic, I guess. When I first started out, I was full of enthusiasm and wanted just to buy anything that came across my way. And I guess there's positives and negatives to that. The enthusiasm can get you a long way. But I probably looked at maybe 15, 20 different clinics before I got my first acquisition. And, and it seemed right at the time. And then two came by in very, very quick succession. And I guess one of the things that you're looking for is, one, does it have a great team? Does it, two, has it got a similar culture to what you've nurtured in your own clinic? And then when you're looking to see what you can do with that business, one, you need to see what kind of marketing are they doing now. And the majority of what we looked at was they didn't really have much marketing in place at all. And so then you think, oh, okay, well, I can make an impact here by putting in our, kind of proven marketing strategy.
Yeah.
Although, what we learn is that we need to fine tune that for each site based on locality, based on the demographic that's there, and also then the availability of the team. One of the things that we found that was suddenly we were outstripping the kind of demand, or rather the supply that we had, in terms of the amount of hours we had available in the clinics, and then needed to start recruiting. And, that's always fun. A couple of years ago, it was much harder than it seems to be these days, but it's that's then a necessary thing. And, we spoke about this lots in terms of, you can pile as much money into the advertising as you want, but if you don't have the capacity in the clinic, then it's kind of wasted money at the same time.
Yeah, I do remember. I can't remember which clinic it was, but I wouldn't say it was struggling, but we were certainly looking at getting a lot more patients through. I won't say how much, but it was a lot more than you were used to spending. Initially, you were like, Jesus Christ, that's ridiculous. But then and then obviously within 2 days making the decision, you're like, what's going on? Why have I not got a million patients? But then within about 2 weeks, I would say, you're like, okay, bloody busy now. And it actually worked quite quickly, didn't it?
It is one of those things, and the changeover from looking at marketing as a cost compared to marketing as an investment is a big one. And I think that's a journey that's taken me probably a little bit longer than it should have done to get used to, especially when, I think in one of the clinics, I think we increased the marketing because we were needing to at the time by £800, I think. But we saw then over the next 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month, that was starting to kick in, and quite quickly we got really busy, and the practice became fully booked within a couple of months because of that kind of marketing. And we've since scaled it back because we don't actually need that level anymore. And I think that's the best thing about you guys and the team, is that we can have a conversation about it all. And if I've got issues and I'm stressing about stuff that feels outside of my control, because marketing largely is, because I don't have the background in it, that can get some real advice, some helpful hints and tips. And I'm being told to calm down. There's nothing to stress about here. We've got this in hand, and this is what the kind of timescales we're looking at. That's really
This sounds like a great advert for the HMDG. Let's not do that.
yeah. No, it's I guess it's been part of, like, as a business owner, especially when you're juggling 4 different clinics, there are lots of things that stress you out, and spend is one of them. Especially when you've bought clinics, you've spent money, you're investing money in refurbs and new equipment and things like that. Then it is quite important that you get the return on investment too.
Yeah, let's focus on that, because it's quite interesting. Because you are, and we've become very good friends over the years, and well, at least from my side, but you are quite a risk averse person. We talked about this the other day, that you're quite risk averse. And I think as a person who is, whether you're acquiring or opening multiple clinics, you can't be that risk averse. You have to take those chances. And some of that is obviously, from going from someone that never did marketing to, okay, I'll do a little bit of marketing, to now thinking, shit, I've got to spend more money on marketing than I do on my children. That must have been a bit of a journey, and a bit difficult as well.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, overall, I like to take calculated risks, but when you're dealing with buying clinics, there's a lot of uncertainty there. When you are buying it, even though you think it might be a good fit and that you've got a lot of value to add to that clinic, then there are always things that can scupper that a little bit, or make it harder than you think is going to be. And that's been the real case scenario. For each clinic, it's been a little bit harder than I initially thought it would be. Maybe that was naivety, but then at the same time, it was also real world. I thought I could change something in 3 to 6 months. And, my accountant was saying, well, we deal a lot with these, and you'd look at it probably 12 to 18 months. And, I think my accountant was more correct than I was. So, it is part of that, I guess, naivety, which then you don't understand what the risk is fully.
Let me ask a question on that. With knowing what you do now, and everything that's happened, would you do it again?
That's a difficult one because although it's had its challenges, there's also some positives into it. Obviously the business has doubled in size and, things are going well. So, it's part of the challenge of running a business, I guess. Although I'm maybe risk averse, as you call it, I'm also quite ambitious and I have put my money where my mouth is and pushed into it. We've gone through 12 months, 18 months worth of lots of investment into the business. And, we're hopefully going to be seeing that benefit over the next 18 months. It's kind of a delay in there.
I think a lot of people romanticize the idea of acquiring new clinics or opening new spaces, and it's never as easy as it sounds. And I do sometimes wonder, and I know that there are cases of this, I do sometimes wonder whether if instead of spending all of that time, energy, and money on clinics where you have to often change the culture completely, where you're having to invest a huge amount of money, whether you'd have been better off focusing on the core business that you already have and growing that instead of going on this tangent. Because and we're doing this big survey at the moment. I haven't seen the data yet, but I imagine everyone thinks that you will earn more money and have greater net profit the more clinics you own. I don't think there is a natural kind of, yes, that will happen. I think often it's the other way around. And if you were to put any kind of balance of quality of life versus net profit, you're probably in a massive negative. So what do you think? Do you think instead of, because it's all successful now, it's going brilliantly for you, and you've done a brilliant job. And like many people, you learnt on the job, right? I'm sure you fucked up plenty. Well, I know you fucked up plenty of times.
Well, it's been a big learning curve, put it that way.
Of course, like everyone does. Even, my first business went bust. I thought it was, anyway. But do you think you could have got better results and quicker results and easier results if you'd have just said, well, instead of going down this route of opening lots of different places, I'm just going to focus on Indergaard?
Yeah, we've had this good discussion before, and I think there's two sides to it. I think it comes a little bit down to the geography and the kind of the site where your clinic is at. And, our Leeds clinic it's kind of grown to a size where we're pretty much maximize what we can do in that site, and moving has a big cost to it, and finding the right locality nearby and things like that would be really, really difficult. So I think if we're going to grow there, we'd either have to do more expensive services, which, we kind of do a lot of different things already in our clinic with, shockwave and laser and gait analysis and all these things. So I felt that we were kind of maximizing a little bit what we were doing there. And without being too inventive in terms of scheduling, shifts and stuff like that with people, I felt like I needed to do something different. Now, the argument for staying small and making it more profitable is certainly there. It'd be a lot less to stress about. Then if you wanted to grow, two sides would be, one, could you take the money that you're spending on this, acquiring this new clinic, and actually investing it in a second clinic nearby where you have, your word of mouth, you have a bit of a brand recognition and things like that. And that I would say there's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. You are looking at, you can do the same investment and probably within 12 to 18 months reach the same goal, depending on how well you do it. And I guess the A side of things would be the speed that it can actually happen. And I think that's why most people tend to go the M&A route.
Do you think, and I don't know the answer to this, but I think most of us make decisions that are more emotional than rational many times, even when it comes to big money. Did you do this analysis before you went down this road? Or was it a bit of a case of, you know what, I want to be a big time clinic owner? I know that isn't you as a personality, but you know what I'm saying? I want to grow. I want to have an empire. And was it more of an emotional decision, or was it more of you definitely were rational and you calculated everything out?
The underlying reason why I did it was because I thought that in the way healthcare is going at the moment, where there's much more competition out there, and there are bigger groups coming in and buying up lots of clinics. I thought we would stand in a better place financially if we had a more diversified portfolio, and the whole business would carry itself better. It wasn't necessarily a megalomaniac going, I want to own the world, which seems a bit silly. And because physio is such a small industry anyway, kind of lost my train of thought there.
Well, so it was a good answer without answering the question, which was how much of this was a rational decision, how much emotion?
Yeah. So it in my head, I made a rational decision, but at the same time, you get swept away with the potential. And, you kind of see that big step forward, and you think, oh, well, I can double or triple my business within the next couple of years. And it's kind of like it's certainly possible, but you would then have to be able to take on big risks as well.
Can we put a word of warning out there, actually? Because I think one of the things that you found, and I've certainly found, is that it's very easy for people to sell you the dream, right?
Mm.
You do this with your business, and you 10 times it, and you become a millionaire. And the reality, and this isn't just me saying it, hopefully you back me up. The reality here is you ain't becoming a millionaire anytime soon, right? It is a hard slog. And I've seen what you've been through and the stress and everything else. And you, unlike many others, already had a very stable, high performing, well run, well profitable clinic that essentially could fund the fun and games, right? And many people don't have that and have that backing. And I think there's such a lack of real advice out there from people. It's all too easy now to just say, oh, if I buy 3 clinics, they'll all be like my others, and then I'll be 3 times as rich. But that isn't the case, right?
No, I think, like you say, there's a lot of hard work. Can it happen? Yes. Will it take a long time? Yes. And there's a lot of hard graft that goes in there. I think on the real side of things, if you come in, even me, you have to go and find money to go and do these acquisitions. And if you really want to grow, then you have to either have a backer or have some way of gaining finance to make this happen. And that puts a lot of risk on you because the cash flow has to be there. If you take it on finance and you're going to be spending £200,000 or £300,000, and then you're looking at the repayments of that. That has to come from somewhere. So either has to come from the existing business cash flow or it has to come from the new business cash flow. And as with these things, often there's some form of delayed deferment of the price to the seller. You've got to make sure that you can cover that too. So in realistic terms, 2 to 3 years down the line, you probably haven't made any profit from your acquisition.
Yeah.
And that's real terms. And then the benefit that you might have then is you've got an asset in the future that will cash flow you quite positively. But in those 2 or 3 years, things can be quite stressful, I think.
Dicey. And not just in terms of the business, but I'm sure in terms of family, in terms of what your wife's financial advisor. So she's probably looking at things more closely than others, but probably very useful as well in terms of having a head that does numbers. But I imagine it's quite hard at home as well when you've got kids to pay for and everything else.
Well, I was quite lucky. I structured some good deals and never really put myself too much under pressure. And that's probably where my risk adverseness came into it. I only took on a deal that I knew would be sound. And if I hadn't, then, I think things could have been a lot more stressful.
Well, you say that, but it's even 10 grand here or there or 20 grand here or there can make a huge difference to a lot of people and even to you. But beyond that, it's not like, and we'll go into this in a second, but it's not like it was all smooth sailing. There were, I don't know what I can mention, what I can't mention, but certainly there was one in particular that caused an awful lot of headaches, which could have gone down pretty early on, right?
Yeah, the business that we took on, and it was a calculated risk. I thought I could manage it. The business was struggling when I took it on, and I knew it. We got some accounts that came back, and they weren't very positive just before we signed the deal, and so we had to renegotiate the deal very, very quickly, which meant less money up front, and so it was much less risk for me. And I thought, well, do you know what? I can turn this around, and I can make the change. And it was an incredibly stressful 10, 12 months after signing up, but then got some clarity on it and needed to then restructure it. And the outcome of it is that we have a phenomenal clinic.
Yeah.
But it took a long time to get through that hard bit to get to the good bit.
And 50-50 luck, right? I always say that in any business, 50-50 luck. It could have gone one way, it went the other, fortunately.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It could have gone completely the other way. But yeah, I think it's partially luck and partially leaning into what I already knew. There were certain things that happened that is definitely luck based. Getting the right clinician on board who then came and was really helpful in rebuilding it. That was certainly helpful. But at the same time, because I could then restructure it, I could then build it from more in my image or what we've done successfully in other clinics. And that seemed to also make a difference. So there's a bit of this and a bit of that. But, certainly that deal could have changed it. And it kind of put me off a little bit in terms of buying another clinic. But, I'd still be open to it to this day. I'll probably just be a bit more discerning about what I would take on.
You live and learn, right? You
You
learn.
There's a huge learning curve.
Yeah. So lots of clinic owners out there listening, one of the questions is going to be, how do you finance it?
So there's many ways of doing it. Obviously, you could if you have cash flow in your business, you can usually get a loan. Funding Circle or something like that will lend you quite a bit based on your cash flow, and that could then be um, the kind of the deposit that you make on the business. And so often it's structured in a way where you will agree a sales sum, say £150,000 or £200,000 with the business owner, and you'll pay someone like 50 to 70% of that upfront. So that's usually where you need to take the finance, or if you got money in your bank account just sat there doing nothing, then you can do that too. One thing to remember is that you also have your solicitor's fees and accountancy fees on top of that, which can be quite significant. You're looking at probably close to 10 grand just in solicitor's fees. So that has to come from somewhere. And then, then it comes down to the deferment. And most business owners would like 100% of the money up front on day one. And so it can be a bit of a hard negotiation to get it deferred. But, it's pretty standard to defer over 2 to 3 years based on their accounts. And so you might find that, on a £200,000 deal, you'd pay 120 up front, you'd have £80,000 then. So you have to find maybe 40,000 in the next year and the 40,000 in the year after. And that's what I mean. You have the repayments of that 120,000 on top of then needing to save for that 40,000.
Right.
So you have to make sure that you've done your due diligence on the financial stuff and, the consistency of the accounts. Month on month to know what the cash flow is. And then, the last thing is you just need to make sure that there's some money left in the bank as well. And often that's done from the previous owner where they have to leave what's called a working capital, which covers, like one cycle of insurance billing or something like that to make sure that you're not paying for the running of the business at the same time. That would be a standard kind of sale or share purchase agreement. The other way you can do it is to do an asset purchase, where you buy the goodwill and the trade, but you don't actually buy the company, which has a lot less risk for you as a buyer because you don't take on any historical problems. But then you usually have to pay the money. Same deferred options usually, but you also have to then fund the actual working of the clinic from day one.
And as we know, there may be tax implications further down the line when you do it that way.
There is certainly one of those as well.
We'll get into that. We touched on it with one of those clinics, and I'm interested in sort of the big problems that you face. And before we get on to that, you know what? I know this is really interesting because I am constantly bombarded with people who say things like, right, I'm going to stop working clinically. I'm going to focus on my business. I'm going to optimize it. And then I'm going to buy more clinics and I'm going to expand, et cetera, et cetera. And they're sat there, they're doing 80% of the revenue within their business. They stop working clinically. They hire some sports therapists or some physios, and then their business basically implodes. I'm seeing it more and more. And I think there's this idiotic trend for clinic owners to go, oh, I'm going to sit back, get out of clinical work and run the business. And I can't imagine if 3 years ago I'd have said, that's it, guys. I'm going to step back and I'm going to run the business and not, it's insane. But you did manage to do it. And I'm really interested because you certainly couldn't be, because this is another thing, right? You can't be buying businesses and acquiring businesses and building businesses if you're working 100 hours clinically every week. So how did you move from being the biggest earner within the clinic to now bring in very little? I imagine less than 10%. How did you do that? How long did it take? Because this is another thing. People think, oh, I'll do it within a 3-month period. How long did it take and how did you do it?
I guess like everybody else, I was trying to juggle everything at once, even before I did any acquisitions. And so when I then made my first acquisition, I knew that I needed to free up some time. And so I started off by cutting 2 days just immediately. But at the same time, I hired one other person and he was already part-time in my business, but he just increased full-time. So that kind of dovetailed. It was a very gentle transition, I guess, between the two of us. And so nothing really happened dramatically. I certainly wouldn't advise anybody do a big, tomorrow I'm going to be stop working and I've hired a physio to cover me, because one, your patients won't like it at all. There is a method of doing that, obviously. Like you have to have a strategy in place, and that strategy might take you 6 months to 12 months to implement. It's not an overnight success. But as it turned out, it just made me very busy on the days that I was working. And then within a short period of time, I realized that because of the challenges I was facing in the clinic, I needed even more time. And so I had to free up another 2 days worth or a day and a half worth of work quite quickly. And so that then became a little bit of a cash flow pinch, because suddenly there was less money coming into the business, and the other business wasn't really revenue generating at that stage. So then that became an issue. But it only changed when I managed to solve the problems, I guess. And we started then becoming quite cash positive straight away. And then suddenly there was now money coming into the bank account again. And that allowed us to then allowed me to relax a little bit more and stress a little bit less. Because, at one point in time, I was thinking, oh my God, why am I doing all this work? And I'm not seeing anything for it. In fact, I'm actually starting to do some clinical hours in the other clinic to try to cover the bills. And that's when I kind of went, you know what, this is absolute madness. But yeah, I mean, it is quite possible to move from being full-time clinical and to grow your business. But there's so many factors involved there. And,
And it takes time.
it does take time. If, you should kind of cut like half a day every 3 months or something like that, over a period of time, just to allow patients the chance to be here one day and then you're gone the next. But
Well,
interestingly, that's exactly what happened to me this year, because in February I fell over skiing and broke my hand. And so my 2 days became 0 days quite quickly. And I had to, proper scurry to hire another physio.
yeah, I think it's also worth mentioning that if your physio is PAYE versus contract, that makes a huge difference as well. Because if you're doing the work and you're generating 100% of it, if you give it to PAYE, you're still to some extent generating 100% other than their wage. But if you're losing 50%, 60% in some cases, you're almost having to get double the patients in just to make exactly the same net profit as you were when you were doing it yourself. I think people often forget that and then run into trouble.
Well, often that's sold as, it's going to be a little bit less money in the short term, but better for the long term. But I still think that, there is a way of doing that quite easily, bringing somebody on board and teaching them what you do with your patients, so the transition becomes quite seamless and you can pass them on and things like that.
It's interesting because that it's a good quote. That it's Uber says half a day every 3 months. That's your optimal, and I think you're probably not far off. Maybe a day. Maybe you could get.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably do a day. Just inform your patient that, in 3 months' time I'm going to be working 4 days a week, or in 6 months' time I'm going to be doing, 3 days.
There's still, you know what? There's still the problem, particularly when you got your name above the door, right? Indergaard Physio. It's not Leeds Physio. People still want to come and see you. So there is also a little loss of traction there, or maybe difficulty where people want to see you. Now, one thing you didn't do, I don't think, even though I told you to, was put your price up. Did you end up doing that?
I did in the end. I did. It's something that I kind of battled for many, many years, because I kind of wanted my patients to come in and think that seeing the other people was the same as seeing me. So even if that potentially wasn't the case, because they have a built up relationship with me and they trust me a bit more, then, I didn't want them to feel like the other physios were lesser then. And so that was my philosophy behind it. I think now that my prices are a bit bigger, nobody really skipped a beat. People still want to book in, and, I haven't really seen any problems with it.
Yeah, you were worried. I remember at the time I was thinking, if I charge that much money, no one will want to come see me. I said, they'll probably want to see you more, because the more you charge, the more perceived value they have in that.
Yeah, I would think that is actually correct. And, I think having that kind of 2-tier system can work for many clinics, especially when you've been around for, 10 years in your clinic, you've got a built up reputation, you bring somebody on, your time is always going to be a little bit more in demand. And, I think your experience and things like that comes into it too. And I think we shouldn't be too scared about charging a little bit extra for that. It's worth more.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's no different to someone getting a haircut, right? You can go and get your, I always say, get your haircut for 500 quid with a creative director, or 50 quid with, some junior person. And I think people are used to that. We're used to it in all areas of our lives. We can pay different amounts for different levels of skill, even if sometimes the skill is, pretty much the same. We still perceive that a partner in a law firm is better than the junior in the law firm. It may not necessarily be true, but point is we're willing to pay more. And I think we've seen it more and more now with clinics doing tiered pricing, but particularly for the owner. If you're looking to get out of clinical work a little bit, it's simple supply and demand. You have less supply, you've got high demand, you've got to put those prices up.
Absolutely. And there'll be, 30, 40% of your patients that will automatically just stick with you because they like you. And the rest of them will go, I'm quite happy seeing the junior or the other physio, because I'm not really that bothered. And then new people that come in, they'll have a choice. If they perceive that there's more value in seeing the clinical director of the business, then they'll quite happily pay for it. But if they just want to book in next available appointment, then they'll do that too.
So let's get onto the acquisition stuff again. You said to me the other day, the legacy of the old owner hangs over the clinic often. Culture is a massive thing. Let's get into some of the problems, some of the real issues that you faced, both expected, unexpected, things that were much bigger issues than you thought they were going to be. So this is really for the clinic owner that's thinking, I'm either going to expand through acquisition or I'm going to build a new clinic. Talk to me about the culture and the issues there.
So, I mean, culture is massive, right? So whether you like it or not, you've nurtured a culture within your business over the years that you've been running it. Your way of doing it, your way of managing problems, your way of celebrating success, your way of dealing with wages and wage rises and all these things, and your philosophy of treatment, everything that you've built in your space. So when somebody new comes in, there's going to be some friction points. And so even though you think that on the surface of things, like one of my clinics, we're super aligned, but our management styles are very different. And so when you show up in a different way, often the friction will be, I guess, uncertainty, a bit of being a little bit scared of the new interaction, and defensiveness for sure from your new staff members, because they don't know you. They might have hangups from the previous owner in terms of how he was dealing with things, or she was dealing with things, and then how they respond to you based on their previous interactions. At the same time, they're worried about you changing things, moving things around. They might have been stuck in a way of doing it for 10 years, and you're going, well, no, from tomorrow, we're changing the operating system. We're going to change the practice management systems. Your whole workflow is going to change. Then you go with we're going to make things more efficient. We're going to automate things and things like that. And they go, oh my God, where's my job going? And then, so, you naturally, well, I got a lot of feedback in one of my businesses where at one point I thought, are they actively working against me here? And I was thinking, that's just bonkers, because I'm paying all the wages and making sure that, they've got a job to go to and things like that. But, it certainly felt that way. And whether it was the case or not is difficult to know. But, it could have been easier. And, I guess I've learned a lot from that too. Like I'd probably show up in a different way now than if I were to do it again. But, there are certain things that need to happen in a business too. And they kind of need to be your new team members.
Would you, because I imagine, knowing you kind of walked in and said, right, guys, this is going to be amazing. We're changing everything and it's going to be better. I imagine now you're a little bit more gentle with things and kind of maybe take your time a bit more.
I'm actually quite soft. So I'll go in and, I like to empower people. I like to get people's opinions on things. I like people to be team members. And, in one of the businesses was, certainly they've been told what to do, and they always just follow the SOPs. And so they wouldn't step outside unless I've actually written it down. And yeah, I mean, I probably went in there with enthusiasm and trying to think, well, we're going to do things slightly differently now. And I can see how that might have put people's backs up a little bit. I think that's only natural. And I think it's just the change, the uncertainty of that change. But yeah, probably a little bit more softly.
I was wondering if you had a strategy initially of kind of, okay, we've got Indergaard Physio, it runs beautifully. How is there a strategy to say, okay, I'm going to get these other clinics and I'm going to kind of homogenize them, and everything's going to be the same across those different clinics, and we're going to have the same, whether it's systems, i.e. technology, or whether it's policies for staff, or whatever the case may be? Was that the initial strategy? And is that still the strategy after learning what you've learned?
The initial strategy was to try to combine everybody on the same systems, just so that we can have oversight as a business. Like you're trying to run 4 different businesses. If you have different, like we had Microsoft in one camp and we had Google in the other camp using Google Workspace, and there was friction. You had to deal with 2 different systems and 2 different ways of doing things. And so trying to homogenize that as much as possible, but that in itself was quite difficult to do.
But what about, I'm thinking about maybe how you do the CPD in the clinics, or how you give your time to staff, or maybe even HR policies, holiday policies, those sorts of things. I imagine initially, because this would be my brain, let's just do it all the same as this successful clinic. But did that actually happen?
Yeah, to a certain extent, it did. Like you got to take into account what they already have in place. Because I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to just swap and change contracts and things like that without, speaking to people. But that's something that then takes a little time, because you need to speak to people, you need to explain what you're trying to do. CPD, we went from having individual stuff, we now have combined things where we do online sessions every month, and the whole team actually gel together a bit more. They share with each other, And so that's been an important thing. And bringing in everybody onto the kind of the same communication platforms made a difference too. Like we use Slack a lot in the clinic for communication, one between admin teams and two between clinicians as well. And that's proven to be really helpful too, because everybody starts to feel like they're part of something bigger. And I think that's quite important too, is you know, for them to realize that, you know, you are looking after them, but you also are part of much bigger. So they see that side of things too. I think that can be quite important for the cultures of things.
It's amazing actually how few clinics use Slack. I'm amazed. So in the corporate world, it's like if you're not on Slack, you're not alive. But in the healthcare space, very few clinics use Slack, and I mean, some will use WhatsApp groups or whatever, which I think is it can work, but it's never quite as functional as Slack can be, particularly with the different channels. But I think that's right in terms of getting everyone involved, and we do little things like we had one this morning. Every Monday morning, the first thing anyone sees is a Geekbot automation that asks them a question. It could be anything, but today was who is your biggest mentor, biggest impact on your life? And it might be what's your favorite pizza. It could be any kind of question, but it kind of gets things the juice flowing on a Monday morning, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So many cool things you can do with Slack. And you're right. I think just culturally, it works really nicely. So this is an interesting one then. So you've got your individual clinics, but do you then and I know they're in different locations, but do the physios all feel like they're part of a greater Indergaard group, or do they still feel like they're individuals within their individual clinics? And then do you do socials or team events across everyone or by clinic?
So in terms of team events and socials, that's usually done by clinic, just because of geography. You know, we're spread out from the Wirral all the way up to Leeds. So there's quite a geographical spread, and that's difficult to coordinate. I do think that I would like to think that they feel like they're part of a bigger group, but you know, at the same time, we were trying to retain the identity of the clinic. And so, for instance, we brand them with their original names, partially because marketing works better locally, and two, you know, like they have a legacy within that area too. So if I changed one of the clinics to Indergaard Physiotherapy in West Kirby, for instance, then, you know, people would go, what's this? And so it kind of fits a bit better. You know, part of, you know, one of the things that you like to do is to carry on the legacy of the clinic when you buy it too, so that, you know, lost everything that's been built up, not just in terms of brand recognition and stuff, but also the feel of the clinic and the patients. They have a relationship with the name of the clinic. You know, and that's important, I think.
Yeah, and when we started the business, I certainly didn't want them to change the name to something completely different, you know, help improve or something. So I think, yeah, I understand that. But I'm interested because it would be interesting to kind of bring all of those clinicians together at some point. Maybe here's an idea: you should do an interclinic sports day and make them all compete against each other for a prize. That'll get that'll get a competitive juices flowing. So other than culture, what are some of the other big problems that you faced? Well, what should people look out for that are thinking going down this route?
Yeah, I guess, you know, like, does it come under culture? There's so many things that can go into the culture. The culture is a little bit how they interact with each other. You know, I came into a clinic where they had a really established team. They've been working together for years and years and years. And so I became the outsider. And so breaking down that barrier was really, really difficult. So, you know, it takes a lot out of you as a business owner, I guess, to go into that. You know, you're thinking that you're the big cheese because you now bought this clinic and you own it and everything like that. And they're going, we don't really know who you are. And, you know, and for them to get to know you is tricky, especially if you're not in the location every single day. And that's one of the things I would probably change now. If I were to take on another clinic, I'd probably want to be there more or less every day for the first 3 months, just to be around, have the conversations, learn a bit more about the internal workings of the business and things like that. And I think that would certainly change things.
I've heard that, you know, from a few people. I just went to a restaurant called, I mentioned it, Punk Royale, who are this kind of Scandinavian restaurant. It's very crazy restaurant. If you get the chance to go in London, go. But I was chatting to the manager there, and she said that whenever they open a new location, she will spend the first 6 months there because she needs to get to know the staff. She needs to kind of really teach them about the business and the culture of the business, not about doing the work itself, but who the business is and what they expect and that kind of thing. And same thing happened with, strangely enough, with a hotel owner who he opens up various hotels and he sends a senior management team there to manage it for the first year because they're the only ones that really understand the full culture and so on. So I guess, yeah, spending time. And you didn't spend huge amounts of time there initially, did you?
No, I didn't. And, you know, this is one of the things that, you learn as well is that if you're going to expand really quickly and you're going to buy lots of clinics, you better make sure that you have a team that's helping you with that. And so
Mm.
if it's not you, then there has to be somebody in the business who can actually go in and do that job.
Do you mean in the original clinic, or do you mean in the new clinics?
You probably need somebody from your original clinic or in your original team that understands your business and understands where you're trying to bring this new business into. But it's not to say that your existing business can't help you. Often when you look at acquisitions, you're looking for talented team members. And if you can get some proper weapons of clinicians and admin people to really come in and help you on the operational side of things too. But I think in terms of if you want to grow another 2 or 3 clinics a year, then there's got to be somebody in charge of actually integrating these clinics. And, if you're trying to think of running your business, being that integrations person and being the person who mentors everybody and looks after the finances and speaks to the marketing team and everything like that, suddenly you will run out of time. And
Mm.
so I think that's one of the limitations, and certainly one of the limitations that I've met, in the fact that, to get somebody involved like that, you have to have much higher margins than we do in physio. So, and you either need some financial backing, I think, to be able to take that next step, um, or you've grown to a certain size that you have the cash flow in the business to be able to afford that too.
Sure, there's this middle ground, isn't there, where you don't have enough cash flow, so you can't pay for some of the team that you really need, but you can't get to the next stage without doing that or killing yourself. It's one of the two.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when you're a six physio or whatever, you just throw money at it. Who cares? You hire whatever you need, but it's difficult to do
I
initially.
guess, like we are a relatively small business. And if our turnover was twice as much as it was now, then yeah, we would be able to afford having one person whose role was to just integrate another acquisition. But it comes a time. The goal was never to grow as big as possible. The goal was to grow a bit, but have it manageable, have control over the service delivery, make sure that the quality was there, and that we were still doing a really good job. I think the bigger you are, the must be so much harder to
That's,
maintain the quality within the clinics.
that's an interesting one. So I know you, number one, patient outcomes, right? That's it. That's what you want. I'm about to talk to a PE next week, I think, and I'm going to ask them a similar question, because you can't be up here with patient outcomes if your profit is down here, right? So I'm wondering, how did you, because I know you did, but I'm sure there are times where you're like, well, patient outcomes, profit, that's kind of where I want to be because I need the profit. How do you stop yourself from becoming a corporate twat and thinking, well, let's care a bit less about patient outcomes because I need the money to come in. I've got to pay the bills.
The quality is the North Star. At one point I was quite tempted. I was approached by a corporate entity and they said, we can send you probably about 120 treatments a month, but we're going to pay you £30 a session to do that. I was like, I really can't do that. Can we meet somewhere in the middle? With our normal fee is £50 a session. Can we, we're quite happy to discount that to 45. And they literally ghosted me. And so, just there has to be a point where you've got to keep your North Star. And for me, that is the patient quality in terms of the treatments and the outcomes that we're getting. And like quite rightly said, you want to make sure that you're delivering a good service. And that means being
But it
able to.
must be, but it must be easy to say, you know what, I'm just going to hire these 3 crappy physios because I know they're cheap. That's going to hit my profit margin. I'm going to make more money and I'm going to put myself in a more comfortable position. It's very easy to do that. And I know companies that are doing that.
I
Why?
guess it's easy, but if you're hiring crappy physios, then your patient outcomes will nosedive and your profit will nosedive with that too. You'll have a clinician that sits there with 50% capacity, and if you understand that most of that money is going to pay their wage, then there isn't much
I
left for
wonder
you.
if that's true. I'm not so sure that patient outcomes and profit and revenue are inextricably linked. I just don't think they are. I think there's many clinics that are providing absolute shit house of care, but still making a ton of money. And as long as they got the marketing right, bad marketing might add. I think there's plenty of people can make money through patient outcomes still all the time.
Becomes a very expensive business model, doesn't it? If you
No.
have to rely on, if you say you have a big churn rate, people are dropping off like flies, and 50% of your patients are disappearing every week. Then you have to have the marketing budget there. But yeah, I'm pretty sure people can make a business model out of it and make money out of it.
But you managed to stick with the let's keep things at a high standard, which is
Yeah,
good.
that's
Okay.
kind of what our goal was.
I know we have a hard stop in about 2 minutes. So I want to know what are the most expected, very quick, short fire questions. What's the most unexpected issue, maybe stupidest, funniest thing that you hit that you just never thought was ever going to be a problem?
In terms of the acquisitions,
Yeah. Something happened whilst.
I'm trying to think. Unexpected problem. The biggest one was probably being chucked out of our premises. Yeah, I think we got given 3 months' notice to be chucked out of the premises on one of them, and then subsequently we found new premises, and we got given 6 weeks again, and we had to overcome that. We had to find new premises, which we did, and we're now in some lovely locations. But
Yeah, it's all worked out well.
there was a bit of luck in that it was available. Certainly, yeah, that was kind of unexpected.
It's always, again, just for anyone who's thinking going down this route, don't expect it all to be smooth sailing. Shit will happen.
These things happen. We were reliant on another clinic, and they changed their mind about what they wanted to do the space for, and then we just got given our marching orders, and we didn't really have much more than a 3 month notice period, so that was kind of it.
Which is not the best thing when you're buying a clinic to only have a 3 month notice, but you would probably, or at least that you're probably looking at that next time you buy a clinic to make sure there's something a little bit more stable there.
Absolutely. I read all the contracts before I took it on, and I thought, well, do you know what? The clinic's been there since 2007. It's unlikely to change, right?
Oops. Right, exactly. It's unlikely. Right, next one. What 3 qualities do you think a person needs, absolute must-haves, to succeed and make something like this work?
Resiliency, patience, and enthusiasm.
And a little bit of madness.
A little bit of madness, perhaps. There are easier ways of making money.
Certainly are. Sell courses on how to do this stuff. That's probably
guess so. Yeah,
And last one is more of a serious one, very quickly. I know we've got to go, but it's a serious point. I think it's an important one. I remember when I was running stuff here at HMDG, I had a bit of a nervous breakdown. Not a nervous breakdown, but a breakdown. And something that I think is really interesting is that there's so few people, especially when you're looking at this stuff, they all want to show themselves with their Lambo and their Ferraris and their big houses and their expensive watches, and they want to always make out everything's going really well, but that isn't the case. Is that something that, because I think you did open up to people, right? It was really, how important was it to be able to have a support group where you could go, you know what, I'm Elon Musk here and shit's going south, like I need some help. How important was that to have that support group?
I think hugely important. I think if you sit there and having to pretend to people that everything is okay, then that could lead to worse things down the line, because you become so isolated, right? And even just having a sounding board, even if they don't offer you any help, just the fact that you can voice your problems, and often, they have nothing to say because nobody's been in that situation before. They might just go, okay, I've heard you, you've got this. So that's important. But then, you've had a brunt of it. You've helped me out. At times I've got this problem and I need to fix it. And then because of your experience, within the industry, you've been able to kind of just nudge me in the right direction with that. I've got a great group of clinic owners that we speak about a lot of different things. And I don't really feel that there's a need to pretend. And so I've been quite open in that group going, do you know what? This is shit. And, I don't know why I even bother doing it. And then, there's hope to be had, because other clinics have had the same issues. They've met the same resistance. They've had to put in a new system that fixes a problem. There's always some help to be had there. So
I wanted to make this point because there are so many clinic owners I see who are really struggling, and sometimes they do actually open up to me, but they on the outside everything's amazing. Look how wonderful I am. Look how rich I am. I've got these big businesses, but they don't ever have that support group where they go, shit, it's actually really bad and I need some help. And I think it's important to have that support group. And I think going back to the qualities that you had, I think one of them has to be humility, because whether that is walking into a clinic and thinking, well, I know how to run a business way better than all of these staff that have been there for 15 years. Sometimes you got to say, you know what, like you say, let's ask you questions. What would you change? What do you think needs doing? Or it's, shit's really tough and I need some help and I need someone to even just listen to me or whatever. And I think it's an important point because, people always go on about mental health, and actually I think men suffer just as much as anyone else, if not more, because they don't bloody speak up. And I think it's definitely an issue in this industry. Everything's a little bit gung-ho and testosterone at time.
I guess, well, running a business is hard. However good you are and however resilient you are, there's always going to be problems when you're running a business. I think, it's invaluable to have a peer group that you can speak to.
it's hard, but sometimes it's not just about, it just gets on top of you. There's too much, right? You're
Yeah.
like, you can't, okay, enough of the fucking problems. You've given me 15 today. I can't deal with another, and then another 5 come along, you know?
Quite often that's the case. It's the volume of requests and volume of problems that hits your desk on a given day.
Yeah.
And you
Or
think,
something that happened
do
to you
that.
not,
The next day, there's another pile on your desk.
yeah, or something that happened to you the other day, which it was a single issue, but it's a significant one, right? And these things that it's just, I remember you going, for fuck's sake. And it's so important. I do. And let's end on that point, because I think it is important, if you're going to go down this route, that you do make sure you have a support group, you got a bit of humility, and you have some people that you can open up to. Good. All right. Thank you so much for doing this. I know I've made you late for your next meeting, but thank you again. And if anyone wants to get in touch with Uwe, then yeah, let us know, because I'm sure you'd be more than willing to give out some advice, and
Absolutely.
anyone looking to go down this route. All right. Thanks very much, and we'll chat soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Michael.